Okay, I'm Yves Robert from École Normale Supérieure de Lyon. I'm also working in the lab of Jack Dongara in Knoxville. It's very important because these are the guys who are developing the fault-tolerant version of MPI, which is called ULFM for user-level failure mitigation. And it aimed at answering the last question that was raised. What if an application has a failure? Can it continue executing with a reduced number of resources? Current MPI does not allow that, but ULFM does. So if you're interested, it's not in the official version, but it's a branch. So just go and look on the MPI forum. Okay, that said, I would like to discuss three problems. The first has been already introduced, so I will go on and continue with it, multi-level checkpointing. Then address silent errors that were also touched upon with the first talk. And finally, tell you a little bit of what we are trying to do with workflows. I have many slides, I won't show them all, and I will try to spare you most of the maths. They are here for backup, mostly. Okay, multi-level checkpointing. It goes like this. We have seen this. When you have an error, a fail stop error, you stop executing, and you have to re-execute part of your job after recovering. We have all seen that. The only question that was not addressed so far is how frequent do this operation of checkpointing should take place. This is the HKCD, it's not working. This is the two sides of the plot. Here I am checkpointing too often, and I am losing a lot of time checkpointing if I don't have many failures. Here on the other way around, I am not checkpointing very often, so it's nice if I don't have failure, but each time I get one, I have to execute a lot of work. So this problem has been solved since a long time. It's called the Young-Daly approximation formula. You can even have an exact formula for the time you need to execute, the expected time you need to execute a chunk of work of size W. I don't want to comment upon it. I just want to mention here that in this famous formula, here, is 2 times the checkpoint time divided by the inverse of the failure rate, which is the MTBF. Well, if you think about it, you don't really know much. I mean, developing on the previous arguments. President told you we are not sure of the MTBF. The only thing we know for sure is that the more processors are enrolled in the application, the shorter the MTBF. In fact, it's easy to show that it is inversely proportional to that number. But we don't have an accurate estimation of the MTBF of a single resource. So basically, the current strategy would be to try with some MTBF and a regular Al-Adali period and increase it if the failures are less frequent than you expect, and on the contrary, shorten it if they are more frequent. Also, another point that was mentioned just at the end of Leonardo's talk, this checkpointing time here, what it is? It is the time you need to dump your checkpoint file from your memory, the memory of the processors, to the file system. What if many applications are doing the same thing at the same time? You compete, I/O has congestion, your checkpoint time slows down by a factor proportional to the number of competing applications, and in fact, you end up, A, checkpointing much longer than you thought, B, checkpointing too often. So it's really the case that Leo was mentioning, that it would be nice to have some kind of I/O synchronization for checkpointing. Okay, let me proceed with multi-level checkpointing. Leo made a good case of all the levels you could checkpoint to. I have a first question that I need to ask myself. Can I take checkpoints at different levels arbitrarily, or do I kind of need to synchronize them? And I believe the good answer is synchronizing, because first you have a hierarchy. So your file, it moves from one level to the next, to the next, to the next, and there is no harm in leaving a copy in the process. And also, if you don't synchronize, you may have to take several checkpoints at different levels simultaneously, and it's not clear what you should do. Okay, assuming that you synchronize your checkpoints, what can you do with two levels? Can you come up with some nice period for your checkpoint time? Well, we tried that 2 years ago, and it was very complicated. You see, the question is, you have a sequence here, you do some chunk of work, and then you checkpoint level 1, say in memory, and then another sequence of work, you checkpoint in level 1, memory, and then finally you checkpoint to the file system. The only good thing is that because there is a memoryless property, you know that when you have checkpointed to the file system, it's as if you were beginning again, so the next pattern can be the same as the previous one. I mean, if it were optimal here, it will be optimal for the next one. So the questions are, how many chunks do you want? Do they need to have the same length? And what are the relative periods of checkpointing at level 1 and at level 2? And in fact, we did some first-order approximation, and it's nice because you see that it generalizes the Young-Daly formula for two levels. I had the square root of 2 lambda c for one level. Now I have two levels, and I add up the two formulas. So of course, it's tempting to go and to generalize for 3 levels. And we did that in a recent paper. And we also showed how to select the levels you want to use. Okay, don't want to bother you with the math, I promised. There are some plots that show that it is better than one level, we all know that. I would like to conclude this small overview with a warning. My formula is nice, it's easy to use. I'm afraid nobody used it yet. In fact, in real life, I was told by my friend in Knoxville that almost nobody uses the Young-Daly formula. And the sad reality is that on big platforms, the checkpoint time is 1 hour by default for all applications. That was the case for the Cielo platform at Sandia, for instance, regardless of the number of processors enrolled by the applications. So it's a pity because at least when you have twice the number of processors, you should checkpoint twice more often. But okay, so we are not yet checkpointing for many levels and implementing these periods. And also these periods are kind of inaccurate because all the maths assume first-order approximation, which means that the MTBF must be large enough in front of the resilience parameter, checkpoint, recovery, downtime. And if you go to a large number of processors, it's not necessarily the case. Also, we assume that failures or errors are independent from one level to another, which is obviously not true. Also, we assume failures are independent in general, even in the same level, which is obviously not true, neither temporally nor spatially. But we do that because we don't know how to do otherwise. And I'm not sure of many convincing results about failure correlation to model them, I mean. Of course, there are many studies and many reports, and you can use logs, even though our friends from the National Laboratory are a little cautious in letting the community access to the logs. We regret that. But for those we can use, we see that there are correlations, but it's hard to assess. Okay, let me move on to the second topic, which is silent errors. So I will be very short. So it's just to be sure we are speaking the same thing. We have seen the process for a fail-stop error. For a silent error, it's a bit different. It goes like this. You proceed with your execution, and then before checkpointing, you want to check your result. You want to be sure that you won't be checkpointing corrupted data. How can you be sure? Well, you can't. But you can have a good approximation or a good insight if you implement a detector or verification mechanism. I'm going to show you a few in a minute. Assume you have one. It's a little bit different than before because you have to go up to the end of the period. Then you check whether there is a silent error or not. I mean, you check your data. If it's good, you checkpoint. If it's corrupted, you roll back the entire period. So the optimal formula is close to DALIs, but this factor 2 missing is coming from the fact that we always go to the end of the period. Okay, detectors, many. The whole community is working a lot on detectors. Leo has been a big contributor, people in Argonne as well. There are several. The most frequent detectors I can think of are the simple tests that we do in iterative linear algebra. For instance, we do some conjugate gradient or GMRS. We know some vectors should be orthogonal, so from time to time we check the dot product. If it's close to 0, it's nice. If it's not, well, we may have a problem. So these kind of detectors, they will for sure detect some errors. I don't think we are going to detect all of them. So there are various interesting mechanisms. Let me just mention another one, even if I lose time. I like the scheme by Benson, Schmidt, and Schreiber, which is called approximate replication. They are solving PDEs, and they do some Runge-Kutta method. And this Runge-Kutta method, there are several levels. And the higher the level, the more costly, but also the more accurate. So they run in parallel 2 levels, a high level and a low level. So instead of plain replication, it's approximate replication. And they make the test every few iterations. If both results are in concordance, it's good. If they are not, they have detected some error. Of course, it's not always the case that the error is a true one. And of course, if you need to use a high order scheme, it's for some reason. And maybe the low order scheme will diverge. So there are many problems to solve. But just to tell you, there's a lot of work in the community for that kind of detecting silent errors. In fact, I'm not sure I trust it. It depends. When I'm presenting a talk on some verification mechanism, I pretend to trust that I trust the detectors. When here today I want to say that we should use replication if we want to be sure, I claim they are not completely accurate. You will pick your side of truth depending upon your application. For sure, there is no free lunch. I mean, you want a detector that is cheap, much cheaper than replication. Replication or triplication are age-old methods. They use it in real-time systems or in critical systems. We are happy to have them when we fly a plane. Everything is triplicate, and it's good. We don't want to lose 2/3 of big machines at DOE because of replication. So we try to invent this verification mechanism or detector, but they may fail. So there's a big concern. And in what we did recently, we tried to investigate whether replication, let me show you just here, would be good, or even triplication will be good for detecting and even correcting silent errors, and whether some reasonable execution scenarios were favoring the use of this kind of mechanisms. Well, if your application is a black box, there is not much you can do else than replicating. And if you are in an environment where the failure rate is high, you may want to go to triplicating, or even more for the next generation machines. We don't know. So we try to assess mathematically what was the right level to do this. Okay, I want to do, to tell you more. I told you I will skip a lot of maths. I just want to tell you, I'm not sure about these detectors. There's a big concern in the community right now about trustworthy computing. I guess you've heard the story that people in Livermore have run 10 benchmarks dating from 10 years old benchmark, and they have recomputed 8 different results out of the 10, which makes you think that what bits that you get out of hours of computation are not very reliable. So trustworthy computing is a big issue, and silent errors contribute to it. I mean, if I may say, the numerical people have known for long that rounding errors are a pain in floating point computations. Silent errors are worse because they spoil not only the lowest order bits, but any bit. And if you spoil or change a sign bit or an exponent bit, it's worse than a low order bit for sure. And these bit flips, they are unnoticed. They can strike everywhere. In the bus, for instance, there is no protection. So there's a big concern about this issue. Okay, let me try to spend 10 minutes on workflows. We've been trying to checkpoint for workflows for very long, and we have made little progress. In fact, there are solutions not only for chain of tasks, because chains are very simple. They go one after the other, and you can try and checkpoint from task to task. Let me give you an example. First of all, what do we do actually when you run a workflow on, say, on a cloud platform and you want to ensure resilience? It's easy. You checkpoint everything. You write every task output into the file system. It works fine. It's very costly. And we were asking ourselves, can we do better? And in fact, we faced an unexpected difficulty. It is, even in this simple scenario where you checkpoint everything, is it easy to compute the max span of a solution and to compare two different schedulings? The answer is no. It's very difficult. It's a sharply complete problem, even because now the task, since they can fail, I mean, they have execution times who are probabilistic. They follow some probability distribution, and even if this probability distribution is very simple with two states, the problem is very complicated. So you have to resort to simulation methods like Monte Carlo to compute the length of your schedule. So you have to do this for every schedule. So it's hard to design a heuristic without knowing how to evaluate the objective function, which is the time of your schedule. Okay, first difficulty. And second difficulty, if you don't checkpoint everything, you're at risk. And the risk can ripple away through the computation. Let me show you an example here. I have a simple workflow on two processors, not checkpointing any task. If no failure strikes, I'll be happy and complete as fast as possible. However, if I have two failures, one at T2 and then later at T5, because they are failure, they wipe out the memory of the processors, and then I have to re-execute many tasks. And then I have to decide when I execute T1 and I send the file to T3, who is the owner of this file? Is it kept on P1? Is it on the other processor, on the destination processor? Is it on both? When do I erase them to make room for the next files? And even if you take a policy, you can build examples where you have to re-execute many tasks. So the first idea when you do workflows is to say, I don't want any failure to propagate from one processor to another, which means that every time I have a dependency that goes from one processor to another, I checkpoint the edge. And then I will isolate the catastrophic on each processor, but that's not enough. Because, well, if you do the example, it's a little better, but first of all, you don't have many checkpoints. And second, I may want to add the blue checkpoints in addition to the purple one. So the blue checkpoints, there's a definition here, but just for the intuition, they are used to completely isolate a sequence of tasks from the external world. Why do I want to do this? Like this, I want to isolate T4, T6, T7, T8 from any failure coming either on P1 or on P2. Because I do this, I have a linear chain, and on a linear chain, I know how to checkpoint, and I insert my checkpoints using dynamic programming, and maybe I put this checkpoint here. So either you are optimistic and you do only the purple, which is good if you have few failures, or you are pessimistic and you do purple, blue, and yellow, or you checkpoint everything. So we compared many versions. I don't want to bother you with the details. We don't gain much. So we were disappointed. And my conclusion, lame conclusion, is that we don't know much. And I hate this problem because it looks easy or natural to try and select the task you would checkpoint. There are many approaches that hold for transient error or silent errors, I mean errors that are limited to one task. I mean, you execute the task, and if the output is not good, you re-execute the task. And if you want to do this, the simplest solution is to make a copy of the input before executing the task, so you're safe in case something goes wrong. If you have a fail-stop error, you lose everything on the processor, and it makes the situation dramatically more complicated. And frankly, I'm very disappointed that after 5 years spent on this problem with many bright people, we came up to so disappointing, well, not efficient solutions. So we are still hoping to do better because task systems are becoming very important. And in addition to this ULFM I mentioned in the beginning, my colleagues in Knoxville, they are developing Parsec, which is a runtime scheduler for task graph. And it works very well. It simplifies your life because you express your workflow as a graph, and the scheduler maps everything for you, both on shared memory and distributed memory machines. It uses many strategies, the most efficient being work stealing. That's disappointing for the algorithmicians because the system does better than us within a node. But at least we are needed to dispatch the data on the different nodes in distributed memory. But it does not incorporate resilience yet as the task level. And that's why we were so interested in developing a good strategy for workflows. With that, I will conclude my presentation.
Thank you very much for this realistic talk. And I would like to open the floor for more optimistic questions. Yes, please.
This is not optimistic at all, but the replication scenario that you showed on your slide, that also is somewhat of an optimistic scenario in the sense that in reality it might be worse than that, because you show that the silent error affects only one of the replicas, but not the other. But that could be a strong assumption, right? If the silent error happens in the input before it is fed to both replicas, then both replicas are acting on corrupted data. So even that is not, even though it's an expensive solution, it still can't guarantee.
So you're completely right. Let me elaborate on this. If you run a critical system and you do replication, you want two different hardware and two different software to be sure there is no flaw in the design of your ALU, for instance. Because, I mean, if your multiplier is wrong, you can replicate as long as you want, the output will still be wrong. And second, your question refers to error propagation. Of course, as soon as you have wrong data, they propagate and corrupt everything. So we want to avoid as much as possible the occurrence of wrong data. So that's why you have to take all these detectors or these verification mechanism very often. And also, in most papers, people don't really tell you what errors they are protecting from. Either you can protect from errors in the ALU, meaning the computation goes wrong, or from error in the memory, but you will never protect from errors in the program counter, for instance. That's too dangerous. I mean, you have to do separate reliability for such critical things. Fortunately, I mean, silent errors, if they strike memory or computation, they strike the data of the user with high probability. And then you can checksum, reconstruct, redo the computation. Residual checking was used before. In linear algebra, we use algorithm-based fault tolerance and checksum almost for free every step of the factorizations we implement. There are several methods, but you're completely right. That's why it's very bad. I mean, the big risk is to save a corrupted checkpoint in memory, because from ever on, you will restart with wrong data. So you have no chance to get the good result. And just to conclude on an anecdote, my friend Frank Capello was telling the same as Christian said 2 years ago at Argonne. to detect silent errors, their only mechanism was to run the application for 2 hours, and as soon as they observed erratic data, they said, this must be wrong, let's do it again. So that was state of the art 2 years ago for many applications.
Any other question from the audience? I have a question, maybe not very serious. I've seen George Clooney on the slides, and I didn't understand. I didn't know that he's a fan of resilience. So, is there?
I'm disappointed you didn't recognize me, Florina, but
okay.
That's it. That's an old joke. Sorry for that.
I have a comment on everything. I do agree that the results, I mean, first of all, you have done a lot of work, and I think the community should be thankful for you trying all of these things, even if they didn't work out as efficient as we hoped. But just as with performance measurements, I see the need to protect against faults just another way to, a similar way to what we do to achieve performance. So what if all these resilience mechanisms are just part of the system and you have just slower performance altogether? So instead of trying to actively quantify the cost of resilience and try to reduce it, just make it part of the system and say, okay, the application will run at this speed because that's what the system delivers. And underneath that speed will be fault tolerance, triple redundancy, or everything that is needed. What is your opinion on that?
Well, that's a good question. Christian will correct me, but for instance, I think in the top 500, the Cake computer was the only one with components not from the shelf and designed specially to be more robust than standard components. So their MTBF was an order of magnitude higher. So this is the first step. Still, you can have a very good hardware. It's hard to fight against cosmic rays unless you duplicate or triplicate if you want to correct. And as of now, nobody is ready to pay the price of wasting 2/3 of the machine to ensure the reliability of the computation. I regret that. I was hoping, I mean, I've been promised that I would see many, many faults since I was working on systolic arrays in the 80s, and it never materialized. And now, instead of having millions of nodes, these bad vendors, they are making fat nodes with a lot of hardware inside, but not so many. So the number of fail-stop errors is not such a threat as Christian mentioned, as it used to be. Fortunately, the silent errors are here to let us do some work still.